Recording now. Hello, welcome to Supporting Innovation Through Contribution. My name is George DeMet. I'm the founder and CEO of Palantir.net. We are a full-service web agency based now in Evanston. We work with Drupal and other open source technologies. An increasing number of people also know me as the chair of the Drupal Community Working Group.
What is that? I haven't heard about that.
Yeah. Google it.
Or don't.
So I literally flew in last night around 10 o'clock. We were taking a family spring break trip in Florida. We went down with the boys, spent a couple days in Fort Myers, see their grandmother, and then we drove over to Orlando to spend a few days at Disney World. And so my favorite of the Disney parks is Epcot. It opened in 1982. The front half of the park is called Future World, and it's designed exactly how people in the late 70s and early 80s thought the future was going to look, right? So, like, there's a monorail running around it, there's this enormous, like, geodesic sphere, there's glass pyramids. It's the overall effect is like, if you've never been there, but if you know that one walkway at O'Hare Terminal 1 where there's like the neon lights going on and everything, the overall feel of Epcot is kind of like that, only it's an entire theme park. And so for a place that's designed to be a showcase for technological innovation, it's a little bit ironic that Epcot is a place that's built to promote a vision of the future that never came to be, right? And my point here is that, I believe that true innovation is not just about being able to create something that like looks cool and futuristic. It's about finding new ways to better solve problems. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And Drupal has a very long history of supporting and sparking innovation. Drupal 8 in particular, I believe, represents a fundamental shift in thinking about how websites and other digital experiences are built, right? We've got modular structure, improved APIs, native web services support, and with all of that, I think that Drupal 8 is well positioned to help put people and information together in ways that have never been possible before. But this innovation is only possible because of another thing which I want to talk about today, and that's contribution. So companies, agencies, organizations that contribute to the Drupal project and community play a key role in supporting and sustaining a culture of contribution, right? Contribution can take on many forms, right? It may be that setting aside time for employees to contribute to the Drupal project and community. There are some companies that sponsor people to work exclusively on Drupal as part of their job, and many other companies that donate money to sponsor Drupal initiatives and events. And firms that do this, that contribute to Drupal, are generally driven to do so by extrinsic motivators, right? So it's the belief that working with the community will help them develop better products or help provide them with increased visibility and status within the community, which in turn leads to more business opportunities, better recruiting opportunities. But fundamentally from a company or agency perspective, it's about what value does this bring to my organization. So there's a ever-growing body of research into open source ecosystems that's shedding light on the different ways that different forms of contribution have on innovation, both for firms who contribute as well as the projects that benefit from those contributions. And one of the more interesting studies comes from Jonathan Sims, who's a professor of strategy at Babson College. I know you've been working with Jonathan. We've worked with Jonathan to help him out with his research. So he spent years studying how firms in the Drupal ecosystem engage with each other and with the project to promote open innovation. So he did a paper last year that was published in the Oxford Journal of Industrial and Corporate Change. It's a very dry, very academic paper, but I read it, so you don't have to. And fundamentally, the kind of top level takeaway is that while the impacts of contribution on productivity are usually marginal, contribution does help expand a firm's social ties and can shift their strategic posture and promote innovation. And there's a couple ways that takes place. So he kind of broke down, his research breaks down contribution into two categories. And this is where I'm going to use Michael's pointer. So we have contributing code to the project, and then we also have contributing help. Help is another way of saying support, or kind of community-oriented contributions. So contributing code is associated with stronger social ties and more incremental innovation, but providing help or support to others in the community is associated with a more conservative strategic strategy, but actually more radical innovation. So let me break that down. What this means is that firms who primarily contribute code to projects like Drupal are more likely to be building on top of someone else's work, or they're likely to be collaborating with someone else to solve a shared problem. If you're providing help, on the other hand, it's much more context dependent, and it's more likely to lead to new questions, possible new insights, which in turn provides more opportunities for more radical innovation within a given domain. But regardless of what form contribution takes, participating in an open source ecosystem like Drupal requires that firms be willing and open to share their intellectual property with others. Dries did a recent blog post where he discussed how companies and organizations like Pfizer and Hubert Burda Media are not only sharing Drupal contributions with their competitors, but they're also challenging those competitors to give back as well. He argued that by working together, these organizations not only gain a competitive edge, but they also reap the benefits of accelerated innovation. So the quote is, "Those that contribute to open source are engaging in a virtuous cycle that benefits their own projects. It's a tide that raises all boats, a model that allows progress to accelerate due to wider exposure and public input." So we've actually seen this virtuous cycle play out firsthand at my company, Palantir.net. Several years ago, we found that many of the projects that we worked on, clients often had a very specific set of expectations around content workflow and editorial access based on other content management platforms that they had worked with. And that all too often, Drupal just didn't meet those expectations out of the box. So this was a clear business need. And in response to that business need, we created and released a suite of modules called WorkBench that provided a unified interface and a set of tools to enable authors and editors to focus on managing content instead of on learning how to use Drupal. So this is actually a photo of a bunch of us from Palantir. This is getting together in a hotel room. This is, I believe, at DrupalCon San Francisco, where we started hashing out the first ideas that led to WorkBench over what appears to be a lot of beer.
Explain WorkBench.
So while Palantir team members did the initial heavy lifting on the code development for WorkBench, over time other firms, including some of our competitors, started using and extending the system, building on top of what we had released. Eventually, thanks to the efforts of those involved in the Drupal Workflow Initiative, the moderation component of WorkBench has been added to Drupal core in, I think, 8.3. So this in turn makes the software better for everyone. It in turn makes Drupal a more attractive choice than competing platforms, and it expands the market for the firms that work with it. Win-win-win. So I've been talking about those extrinsic motivators, the external incentives that drive firms to contribute to open source projects like Drupal. But in contrast, individuals who contribute are more likely to be driven by intrinsic motivators. Not only do you get to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, but participating in the Drupal community is also a really good way to form social ties with other like-minded people who want to see their contributions make a difference in the world. And yes, people are pointing out where they are in the photo. This is from DrupalCon last year. So, but there's a problem. And the problem is that despite the large number of individual contributors to the project, a very small number of people actually do the majority of the work. So this is a chart I generated earlier this week. It represents the total number of people who have contributed to Drupal core as of last week. So you can see here, it's about 4,000 people who have contributed to Drupal 8 core. We had one individual who's had almost 2,000 commits. But then that curves down very slightly. And by the time you get into around 400 or 500 or so, you're really only talking about 1 or 2 commits, right? So it's a few dozen people who are doing the majority of the work in Drupal core. This is what's known in open source as the long tail of contribution. So people do presentations and they show charts like this all the time. And and inevitably someone says, well, what about when you add in contrib, right? Doesn't that make a difference? It actually doesn't make that much difference. Dries again did a research project with Matthew Tift from Lullabot last year, where they reviewed contribution data on Drupal.org over a 1-year period. And they found that approximately 51% of the people who contributed, this is including contrib as well, got just 1 credit, while the top 30 contributors, which is the top 1/2 of 1% of all contributors, accounted for over 21% of the total contribution credits. So one very likely reason for this imbalance is actually Drupal's reputation for having a steep learning curve. This is a chart that came out of research that Whitney Hess and the Drupal Association did back in 2014. This is when they were, I was actually working on this with the content working group at the time to help plan out development for Drupal.org. And the research found that while the project is really good at onboarding people at that entry level, that newcomer level of engagement, the transition to higher levels is much, much more difficult, and it's where many people end up dropping out of the project. So one way we can address that is by providing resources and support to help more people move up the contribution ladder, thus spreading the burden across more shoulders, flattening out the pyramid, introducing new perspectives, and preventing burnout, particularly within the core developer community. So having more engaged community members at different levels also helps mitigate one of the kind of historical barriers to Drupal contribution, which has been the shortage of skilled developer talent. But in order to get there, we need to remove artificial barriers to contribution, whether those are real or perceived, because those can undermine both the intrinsic motivation of individual contributors as well as the extrinsic motivation of companies, agencies, and other organizations. One important barrier that's been recently removed is the project application process, which meant that in many cases it could take 6 months to a year for new modules to be approved for publication on Drupal.org. Now, anyone who has an account on Drupal.org can create new projects without waiting and opt into security advisory coverage. So I was talking with Michael about this earlier today, and and there is definitely a lot of work left to be done on this, but this is something that should encourage a lot more people to contribute. Over the last few years, the Drupal Association and others have also worked to help track and acknowledge more forms of contribution on Drupal.org by making improvements to the user and organizational profile pages on the site, adding the ability for organizations to receive credit for works on projects and issues, and tying case studies directly to organizations as well as to individual contributors. Along with paid sponsorships, these improvements enable companies and organizations who contribute to the project and community to receive greater visibility on Drupal.org, benefiting both sales and recruiting efforts. It's important, however, for open source projects not to place too much emphasis on those extrinsic motivators, because that can actually undermine intrinsic motivation, right? If other people are seen as getting a benefit for contribution, it's going to discourage people who are not receiving that benefit from doing it. So recognizing different forms of contribution can be a really delicate balancing act. So there's other forms, in addition to code, there's other forms of contribution, such as local event and user group sponsorship and organization, writing documentation, providing mentorships. These are all really difficult to track. They're not easy to measure, but they're also critically important to the health of the project. So back in 2015 at DrupalCon Barcelona, David Rosas, who's a Drupal developer and PhD student at the University of Surrey, presented his PhD paper, the work that he was doing. He argued that it's actually these forms of community-oriented contributions are actually more important to a project's long-term sustainability than code contributions, because they're emotional experiences. They help strengthen the project's sense of community. So what this means is that if you're a firm who's not in a position to contribute code, for example, we've seen within the last couple of years a lot of very large, advertising agencies and others enter the community, and the way that they work, they're never going to be able to contribute code to the project. However, they can contribute money and or time toward efforts that help promote the project and community, right? So that could be helping to sponsor a local or regional event like the one we're at right now. It could be a Drupal Association sponsorship program as well. And it's these kinds of contributions that can actually very often have a greater impact than just contributing code alone. So a couple other areas where firms can help promote innovation in the Drupal ecosystem is by supporting community leadership training and mentorship programs. These are two things that we've actually been talking about a lot in the community working group over the last year or so. One of the issues is that because we've historically looked at ourselves as a meritocracy, we have a lot of people who have ended up in positions of responsibility in the Drupal community based on their ability to write good code. What we need to do is help emerging leaders in our community develop skills like creative problem solving, conflict resolution, and consensus building so that they can in turn help others be successful as well. We also need to focus our mentorship efforts, not just on onboarding newcomers. We're really good at bringing newcomers into the community, but what we don't do as well is help people move up that skills pyramid. So in an ideal world, we'd be able to provide mentors with the training and support they need to pair up with potential high potential contributors for long-term one-on-one mentorships. Offer more non-code mentoring opportunities for things like running community events. Again, as part of that, we did a lot of research last year and talked to a lot of people. And if you talk to anyone who's been in the Drupal community for a long time, they'll say, I'm only here because so-and-so took their time to help me get where I am. And right now, we don't have any way to support or recognize that. And it is so, so vital. Again, with the non-code mentoring opportunities, running an event like this is a lot of work. It takes a lot of skills. Anyone who's run a Drupal camp can tell you. And very often, it can feel like you're kind of making it from scratch. But the reality is there are a lot of people who've already invented the wheel, and we don't need to keep reinventing it. We just need to make sure that the knowledge gets passed on to more people. So I know in my own company, again, we've spent the last few years actually focusing on growing talent instead of just hiring talent. And we've had great results with that. Doing this not only helps our new hires gain knowledge and experience, but being put in a position to train others has also helped some of the people who've been in our team for a while learn and develop new skills. So in the end, I believe that what has enabled Drupal to become a leading platform for innovation is not just the fact that it has one of the largest and most diverse communities of any open source project, but it also has a culture that supports and values contribution. And that contribution can take many different kinds of forms. It's not just about code. But in order to keep this virtuous cycle going, it's absolutely vital for companies, organizations, and individuals who are using the software to keep encouraging this culture, and for those who are in a position to help provide incentives and to break down the barriers for people to contribute to keep doing that. So, thank you. That's what I have. Does anyone have any questions or topics they want to talk about? Yes?
You talked about incentives. Do you guys organizationally do formal incentives for contribution?
We don't. We provide opportunities. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Incentivizing it at a company level like that, I think the challenge you would run into there is making sure that you're not undermining people's intrinsic motivation. What I'd rather do is foster that intrinsic motivation and provide room and opportunity for that than, rather than, I could see somewhere you get a bonus if you've contributed so much. I think that doing something like that would be really dangerous. Yeah.
Also, one of the things that we do is definitely deal with kudos and notify the entire company when somebody does something that is of value, that doesn't change the bias by offering loans.
Yeah.
That's one way to make it knowledgeable to everybody that this person is really working hard on something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome, and that actually is really key. We have, I hope we have a culture. I'm looking at, we're wearing the plus on our sweaters, right? And we're very big on giving out the pluses to people who do something, and if there's something really really cool or really special, then that usually gets an email around to the whole company as well. But yeah, that's absolutely, I think, where you do it. You encourage that from a cultural standpoint, right? And it's that people want to contribute, not doing it because they think they're going to get a thing in return.
Doug, do you ever try to get your clients engaged in the community, and if so, any success stories?
Yeah, a few. It definitely depends from client to client, right? And we definitely have had situations where we have either won projects or had clients come to us because they have wanted to be part of, they have wanted to contribute back and have those contributions recognized.
Yeah.
I can think of, we did some work in the public media sphere a few years ago, and that was like a really big thing for them. They really wanted to make sure that that we were a firm that was actively engaged, and that any innovations that came out of the project were going to get contributed back. There are other firms, generally in the more corporate area, that are less inclined. They're like, look, we got a business need. We need you to resolve it, and and beyond that, they're less interested. So at that point, I think there's a little bit of education about the value, but the reality is you have to accept that there are many companies and organizations who don't really want that kind of attention or publicity, that they're really just looking to get something done. And but in doing it, you can help educate in terms of the value. Say, look, you're not just getting a thing that we built for you, you're getting a thing that many, many people have built. And because of this thing we're building for you, then going to be able to build even better things down the road. Oh, sorry, I'm going to, yeah, you go.
Thanks. Can you talk a bit about how you guys make the sort of the space that you were talking about for contributing and sort of what you guys do to encourage?
Yeah, so, we're really accommodating in terms of, we kind of roll it into a bucket that kind of goes along with professional development. Because we have a lot of people in the company. We're not all like doing code, right? We're not necessarily even all doing Drupal, right? We're doing a lot of different things, and not everybody is interested in specifically contributing to open source. But there are different areas in which they can contribute to whatever it is that's related to their job that's of interest. And by framing it as kind of a professional development thing, that's something that enables everyone to feel like they're part of it, as opposed to, the development team, gets this thing because they contribute code. Well, what about the rest of the company? What about the people who work in HR? What about the people who work in marketing? What about the project managers, right? Everyone can contribute to the communities that they're most engaged with. They don't necessarily have to be. So it's an overall culture of contribution as opposed to specifically a culture of Drupal contribution. Chris?
You talked about messaging to clients as well, about saying, hey, we've got this group of people that are out building this thing. We do the same thing. Say when we're going up against Sitecore or Adobe, say, hey, they've got a product development team of 50.
Right.
We've got a product development team of 20,000.
Right.
But it's not really true, as you mentioned.
It's like a couple hundred.
It's like,
yeah.
it's like less than 50 that are doing.
Yeah, they're doing most of the work, right? We don't really frame it in that context necessarily. I think it's about having it. I mean, at a certain point, you're actually talking about a product that's being used by so many different clients and customers similar to in solving business needs are similar to the ones you're trying to solve for that client or prospective client. And I think pushing the message in that direction. I mean, we don't really try to compete against, specifically Sitecore or Adobe or whatever, right? I mean, we will provide information, say, hey, this is why we like this system, this is why we work with it, this is why we use it, this is why we think it will deliver the most value for you. But at the end of the day, if they're set on Sitecore, they're set on Sitecore. And usually that comes down to a what am I most familiar with question, which, we can't solve for them. So, yeah, Joe.
Do you think the long tail would look differently if code reviews were included, or re-rolling a patch or testing a patch? Do you think that would make that graph look differently?
I think it would help a little. I mean, it's tough to say because we have no way of tracking those things right now, right? We're just lacking the data. I mean, I would love to see so many different things like tracked that we're just not able to do so right now. I mean, in the conversations that went on about contribution credits, there were a lot of people talking about, well, what about camp organization, right? How about this? How about that? And there's just no way to capture that. I mean, I can tell you, people who organize a camp may end up spending more hours doing that than, people who are prolific core contributors.
Well, those things aren't, but things like re-rolling patches and
Yeah.
reviewing should be getting captured, I think. I mean, I believe I've got like 15 commit credits, and I haven't written any original code. It's all for things like
Right.
re-rolling a patch or even rewriting an issue. So I think we are capturing some of that data,
Mm-hmm.
but not like the camp stuff.
Right. So, if the question is, do I think there are a lot more people contributing a lot more than we're actually recording. Is that long tail quite as steep as it looks? I think the answer is no. But the answer is we just don't have a really clear picture because we're so focused on code. And the kind of the larger question I want people to think about here is contribution, not just as code, but contribution as the way that we all work together to help support this project in this community. So I think that's time. Thanks.
Hit that button, George.
Big red button.